Hi guys, it's Mrs. Rast here, and tonight we're taking notes for the Egyptian pyramids. Please remember that this is your show. You're welcome to pause it, restart it, rewatch it, do whatever it is you need to do in order to get the important information for class. Please take notes on the assigned pages in your notebook. So you should have received that information in your notebook in class today, but if you were gone or maybe you missed that information, you can get it on Edmodo or on my Piper Middle School website. Okay? The title tonight that you're going to put at the top of your page is Egyptian Pyramids, and then you're going to date it. The essential questions that you are going to put off to the left side and be able to answer as you listen to and or read this presentation are the following. Why was the tomb of the pharaoh so important? What time period did pyramid building begin? Who built the pyramids and how long did it take to do that? Why was it important for Egyptians to cooperate? Why did they stop building the pyramids? And lastly, whose tomb was left untouched? Okay, so religion was really important to the early Egyptians. It was part of their everyday daily life, and so the burial sites were seen as important because the Egyptians didn't believe that you just died and were gone. They believed that you died and went on to an afterlife. So in order to have a good afterlife, you had to have a good burial site. And because the pharaoh was seen as a living god, his tomb had to reflect the importance of the gods and how powerful he was to make sure that life stayed good for day-to-day Egyptians. Okay, so pyramid building began in a time period called the Old Kingdom. Okay, when we talk about Egyptian time, it's divided into three parts, and the Old Kingdom is the beginning. The first part, they actually didn't build tombs. They were buried in the ground, but that's not very big. It doesn't show how great you are as a pharaoh. So they began to build something called a mastaba or a mastaba, and you can see that up here at the top. Kind of looks like a rectangular box, and then the tomb and the pharaoh with his belongings would have been buried underground. Okay, then they went to a step pyramid, which you can see right here. There was a pharaoh by the name of Zoser. He wanted something a little bit more spectacular, so he commissioned this type of pyramid being built. And that's pretty nice, but what we typically think of in terms of pyramids are what we see today. These are the three pyramids of Giza, the last wonder of the ancient world, the only wonder of the ancient world still standing today. And this is what typically people think of, and these are tombs for the pharaohs. The tombs were called the houses of eternal life, and the largest pyramid that you'll see today is a great pyramid of the pharaoh Khufu. It took 2 million blocks to build. Khufu really believed that bigger was better, and for about 4,000 years, this was the tallest man-made structure on the planet. His son Menkaure built the next pyramid a little bit smaller than Dad's, and Menkare's son Khafre built the third pyramid a little bit smaller than his dad's, and those are the three pyramids of Giza. Unfortunately, when you build something that big and people know it's the tomb of the pharaoh and is going to hold all of his wealth, all of his possessions, it's kind of a big sign to the grave robbers that this is where the treasure is. And so what would happen is that once the pharaoh was sealed into his tomb, usually it would be broken into at a certain point, and the grave robbers would rob it and make it completely empty. So when archaeologists came along later, there was really nothing left to see. In fact, this is really the only item that robbers could not steal out of Khufu's tomb, and this was his funeral boat. What would happen is when the pharaoh died, they would load up his possessions and his coffin, his sarcophagus, onto the boat along with his family and his paid mourners, and they would sail down the Nile and then entomb him into his pyramid and leave the boat there. And obviously, if you can see the man off to the side here, you can see the scale of the boat, which is pretty big. So obviously, it would be very hard to steal something like this. People might notice. So how did they build the pyramids? Well, it wasn't aliens. But they didn't have machines like we have today. There's no bulldozers, there's no trucks, there's no massive technology like we think of today with cranes to do it? Mostly simple machines like ramps and pulleys and levers and a lot of manpower. It took about 20,000 workers to do the job and 20 years to build. So usually when the pharaoh came to power, even if he's a young guy, they are starting on their tomb right when they're in power, so it's ready for them when they die. Hollywood would have you believe that the pyramids were built by slaves. That's not the case. Archaeologists believe that farmers during the season of flooding would come, and it would be like they were paying their taxes to the pharaoh in terms of physical labor. And there would be big booming towns around the pyramids, and they would be paid in linen and wheat and beer. And once the floods would recede and they could go back to their farming, their time was up until the following year. Just a little humor here. It says, I told you not to try and lift one on your own. Very heavy bricks, folks. The Egyptians needed to cooperate. Obviously, with 20,000 people working on these pyramids, it took a lot of manpower and a lot of time. And because the blocks were so heavy, if the people had not worked together, if they had not cooperated, the pyramids would not have been able to get built, and the pharaoh and Egypt would have suffered. The pharaohs did believe that size mattered. It was important to show their strength, their power, their might, their connections to the gods. They did, however, stop building the pyramids because it got very costly and because of the grave robbers. Grave robbers disturbing your tombs equals a bad afterlife. So eventually what they decided to do is move the pharaohs and their families to an area called the Valley of the Kings, which you can see right here. They would cut tombs into the cliffs. They would still be found, but they were trying to be a little bit more secretive and cut down on the cost. There is one pharaoh that remains hidden for years, and he was a New Kingdom pharaoh, so way past the Old Kingdom time of building pyramids. That was King Tutankhamun, or King Tut. He was not found. His tomb was left untouched and not opened until about the 1920s. So when archaeologists found him by accident, they were amazed because that had not been opened since it had first been sealed at the time of his death. And we'll talk more about King Tut in class. So how much would it cost today to build a pyramid if you were in the pyramid building business and you wanted to create a tomb for someone powerful? There was a study done a few years ago. You can see the site right there. And they figured out that by the time you accounted for all the machinery and supplies and workers and permits and everything you would need to get this thing done, Egyptian style, it would be about $1 billion in today's money. Wow. And that, folks, is it. If you need to go back, please do. But be ready for class tomorrow. See you later.